Hello everyone, welcome back to LifePoint Cap OT90 Challenge. I hope and pray that this video finds you well. And as we are on the last week of our reading challenge, I want to continue to encourage you. As we are in the final stretch, it's on a downhill level, so it's going to get easier and we'll be able to finish strong. So continue to read. And as we are finishing book of Obadiah and going into two other books, Jonah and Micah, let me give just short introduction to these two books. Jonah is well known, and he ministered around 8th century BC, of course, during the time of Israel, when the Assyria was in power and Israel was still intact. Now, the book of Jonah is unique than any other prophet books in the Bible because it's more about Jonah himself than the oracles or messages that he's preaching. So one more time, it's about Jonah than the message that he is trying to deliver to the people of Nineveh or even Israel. So think with me on this, okay? So God gives him assignment to go to Nineveh. He doesn't want to, so he goes the opposite way, but God brings him back to Nineveh with an instrument of a big fish. So Jonah, he is not responding to the call that God is giving him, the assignment. And if you think about the story of Jonah, the sailors or even the Ninevites, after hearing what Jonah had to speak, they respond to the message of God. So Jonah is not responding as to sailors and the Ninevites who are in sin, who are foreigners. Okay, that's something that we need to think about as well. And with that, he doesn't like how God is compassionate towards the people of Nineveh. So they listen to God's word and they respond to God, and God is being very compassionate and gracious towards those people. And Jonah, he doesn't like it. So God wanted to teach him a lesson on that, where he sent a tiny little worm at the end of the book, but Jonah still doesn't get his grace, his provision, his sovereignty. So as a whole, as a bigger picture, in the midst of the prophets, as the prophets were delivering God's word to the people of Israel, and especially to the people of Judah, and if they responded in a slightest slim way positively to those messages, responding, God would have been so gracious and compassionate towards his people. So in the midst of the prophets, in the midst of the messages that God is sending them, Jonah is telling us, hey, you gotta respond. Don't just ignore them. Respond and look at what's happening even to the sailors, even to the nation of Assyria when they responded to the Lord. So think about that as you read. And then let's go to the book of Micah. Prophet Micah, he ministered in the nation of Judah alongside Isaiah around 730 BC. So Micah ministered in Judah when the Assyrian Empire overtakes the nation of Israel. Okay? The message of Micah is very clear. He has two oracles continuing and repeating in his book. First one is indictment, saying, people of Judah, you're doing this wrong. You are sinning against God. Another one is judgment oracles. When you continue to sin, this will happen to you. When you continue to sin, God's gonna punish you. So here are some key takeaways from his book. God is against those who sin. Clearly, that's the message of the prophets. God is against those who sin. And the reason why God is against those who sin is because God is righteous. Our God is righteous, and God is against those who sin. And so, people, you got to do the right thing. When you do the right thing, God forgives. So this book has indictment oracles and judgment oracles, but at the same time, there is a hope in the messages that Micah is bringing. And one of the most prominent one is like, in the line of David, there will be a one who will deliver you. And even in chapter 5, we get the place and location of where Jesus, the baby boy, will be born. So let me read that verse. Micah chapter 5, verse 2, it says this. But you, O Bethlehem, Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is of an old, from ancient days. Okay, we read that during the time of Christmas, and it's coming. And then in the book of Micah, there's a famous verse in chapter 6, verse 8. I'm sure you have heard of this verse, so let me read that verse for us as I end. It says this, He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. All right, everyone, let's continue to read. I want to encourage you, and see you tomorrow.